Hey guys, Simon here from BluffTheSpot, and today I'm going to be sharing with you how I construct my cbetting strategy on monotone flops, and in particular, how I do it in single raise pots both in and out of position. Now, before we jump into this, I want to let you guys know that if you're looking to improve your 3-betting skills, we are still giving away a free copy of Jimmy Duraide's 7 tips to crush your opponent's pre-flop in 3-bet pots, and I recommend all you guys check that out. It's really great stuff, going to really help you improve your game in 3-bet pots. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into it. Let's have a look at how we c-bet on monotone flops. And the first spot we're going to look at is a single raise pot, but small blind versus big blind, and how we actually construct our c-betting strategy. Now, the first thing that I've done is I've brought up a little bit of an aggregate report for how much our EV we have out of position, and our betting frequencies. So how much we bet for the big sizing, how much we bet for the small sizing, and how much we check. Now the total pot in this scenario is 60 chips. So this is a 3/4 sizing, and this is a 25% sizing. Now we can see here that almost always the big sizing is never used. And the big reason for this is that these boards are locked down. And what I mean by that is monotone flops, a lot of people consider are wet, but they're not actually wet boards. They're actually locked down. The nuts are the flush. And they're not like dynamic boards like something like with flush draws or lots of straight draws. They're actually locked down boards, very similar to how paired boards play. And because of this, we actually often want to use small sizings to put a lot of pressure on our opponent's road. He's either going to have one of the suits or he's not. And he's going to have a really hard time defending versus the smaller sizings. Now with that out of the way, we can actually see that the smaller sizing is only ever getting used at most about 45–50% of the time. And the reason for this is that even on the best monotone flops for the out of position raiser, is that actually just not great boards for the small blind. And the big reason for this is that the big blind's calling range has a lot more suited cards. They get to flat very wide versus small blind, and a lot of this flatting range contains a lot of suited cards. We can have actually a look at this. So we can have a look at this here on a board like 8-5-3, and we can see this is what the our raising range is like. But when we have a look at the big blinds range, what we're going to see is we're going to see tons and tons of suited stuff. We're going to have all the small suited stuff that we don't have, and they've actually got just really a lot more suited stuff than we have. And this makes monotone boards really dangerous when you're in the small blind, and we want to take a lot of passive action and a lot of checking to protect ourselves. Now, when I have a look at this, I like to make my strategies really simple. I like to get to the turn, and I don't think there's a huge bit of EV to be gained by making things really complicated on the flop. And so what I often try to do is I often try to simplify my strategies into range bet or range check when I'm out of position. Now, when I have a look at this, I can see that it's probably unlikely I'm going to be able to range bet all of these boards. If any of these boards, we can see that checking is actually the most preferred action. So my first question is what happens if I just range check all these boards? Is that going to be a fine strategy? And what happens, in terms of exploits, with this? Am I going to lose too much EV if my opponent exploits me by me checking too much? And the way I like to do this is I like to pick the best board for the small blind. So this something board like this 8-5-3 board, where we're doing the most amount of betting, and have a look at how it performs under a range check. And so this board that we just looked at, this 8-5-3 board, I've run it as a range check, and we can see here we're just range checking. And I like to have a look at the EV here. So we see the EV here is 28.34. And when we compare this to when we play a mixed strategy of 28.6, we're only losing about 0.25, 0.3 of a chip in a 60 chip pot. So this is like an EV loss of only about 0.5%. And from my point of view, this is a really negligible amount of EV to lose on the flop. Now, for some people, this might be a little bit too high, but in terms of keep playing a strategy that I know how to play really well, I can obviously range check perfectly because I know how to that performs, and range checking is super simple to do. And I'm going to lose a little bit of EV by mixing, which means that the EV loss is probably only going to be closer to maybe 0.3, 0.25%. Now, the other thing that works in our favor when we start playing range checks on boards like this is it actually opens up our opponents to making a lot more mistakes against us. So what actually happens when we play a range check on a board like this is our opponent has to be very, very careful. We've trapped so many strong hands in our range here that when it checks to them, they're only meant to stab like 15, 20% of the time. Now, what this means in game is a lot of the time your opponents are going to overstab versus you when you range check a board that has a decent betting frequency. This means that we get to go pretty crazy check raising them when they overstab us. And this is going to put a lot of pressure on opponents that don't understand that we're totally uncapped when we check these boards. So what happens here is we have a strategy when we range check all these mono boards. That means we're not losing a significant amount of EV. It's only like 0.5% at most. And what also happens is we open the door for our opponents to make mistakes against us. They're going to overstab. We're going to get to over check raise, and we're going to get to put a lot of pressure on them in lines that they don't expect. So this is how, so basically when I'm in the small blind and I, open up and the big blind calls and I see a mono flop, I just range check all of these boards. Even the absolute best boards for us to see bet, this 8-5-3 board, we're not losing significant EV by range checking. And so this makes life really simple for us. We just get to range check and we get to play an aggressive check raise strategy in return. Now, what happens though on the better boards? Now, we can already see on these better boards, these are basically range checks anyway. Now, we don't get to go crazy check raising. And the big reason these boards are really bad versus they often have like an ace or like a double Broadway. And when we think about all the flushes that we're going to have as the small blind, a lot of it's going to be suited aces. Suited king X. So when the ace and the king are on the board, or there's like one ace on the board, or like just two Broadway cards in general, this is really going to cut down on the number of flushes that the small blind can have, and we're going to have to play very defensively and play a really aggressive checking strategy. And so these boards are fine to check our range anyway. And on these better boards, we get to go a little bit crazier on the check raise because we expect our opponents to overstab versus us. Alrighty, well that was very simple for out of position when we're in a single raise pot. You didn't really have to worry about too much. We just get to range check. And I think you guys are going to find that's going to help you guys out in game massively. And we're not going to face as much heat in game when we bet small with a too wide a range, for too much protection, and when opponents are going to raise us too aggressively. All right. Now, what happens though when we're in position? What happens if it's a button versus big blind scenario? And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Here I've generated the same kind of report that I did last time. I've got multiple bet sizes here for big sizes and small sizes. And we can see, again, the most common sizings are these, this 33%, this half pot sizing, or this 25% sizing. We really don't like using big sizes because, again, monotone boards are still lockdown boards. We're not using big sizes on the flop. Now, we can see here on these better boards, these lower boards in particular, where we're going to have all the high flushes, and these give us more strong hands. We're doing quite a big amount of betting, up to 70% of the time. But we can again see on these really bad boards, we're still checking a lot, not as much as it would be when it was like small blind versus big blind, but still checking quite a lot of the time. So the question is, how do we play these boards? Now, this gets a little bit tricky. But the way that I like to break it down is I like to work out how many of these boards I can range bet. And with this, we can see that, these boards where we're betting 70% of the time, these are probably going to be fine range bets. And if we actually have a look at a board here, we're going to see pretty clearly that it's totally fine to do. Alrighty, so this is one of those boards that I've run for a range bet. Jack 6 deuce is one of the better ones. And we're going to see here our EVs 30.88. And if we have a look here, 31.1. So we can see range betting's losing 0.3 of a chip, which is again about 50% of the pot, and that's going to be totally fine. But what's the threshold? What is how far can we range bet before we go, that's unacceptable and we're actually over c-betting these flops? And I think around 7.54 or maybe 10.93 is about going to be the threshold where we're going to go, maybe we need to actually start consider playing a mixed strategy. So if we have a look here, we're going to have a look at a board 10.93. And if we have a look at this board here, we're going to see the EV is 30.66 for range betting. And we have a look here, it's going to be 31.2. So we lose about 0.6 of a chip, which is about 1% of the pot. And this is where I'd say that threshold is. So once we start to get to these, there's Broadway cards involved, it's a little bit more middling. We see here Jack 9-8, double Broadway, ace high boards. Once we get an ace high board or a double Broadway, we probably can't range bet it. But I think everything else is going to be totally fine to range bet in game. And again, when we consider the response from our opponents, it's going to be very, very common for them to misplay our range bets. So if we have a look here when we range bet 10.93, what's meant to happen is they're meant to go crazy check raising us like 20% of the time. And it's really, really hard to find all of these check raises, and I wouldn't expect most people to play this as aggressively in game. Now remember here, the reason that we get to range bet these so wide is I'm using a really small sizing. I'm only using 25%. And this means that we get to bet a little bit wider, range bet a few more boards, and make life really easy for us on the flop. So the tricky thing now is what happens with these boards that aren't acceptable to range bet? What happens if we have like a double Broadway board or we have like an ace high board? What's our strategy there? Now we can see in the absolute worst case scenarios, like something like ace king 6 or like, where there's like ace high, double Broadway, we can probably just range check this. Like we're already checking 80% of the time. It's going to be totally fine to range check this. But for these other cases like ace 8 deuce, 8-5-4, ace 5-4, I think we're going to have to construct a mixed c-betting strategy. And the question is how do we do this? Now, luckily for you guys, I've already built my mixed strategies for this spot, and I'm just going to chuck it up on the screen here and let you guys have a look. So this is my strategy for monotone flops. I'm going to bet my clear value 30% above board. I'm going to bet my underpairs and my trash with showdown about 20% below board, and I'm going to bet everything else at board frequency. And the reason the important thing here is we got to know what the board frequency is. And on monotone boards that we're mixing, we're going to find that the betting frequency of the board is going to be between like 30% and it's going to be around between 50%. And this is going to be that threshold where we've got ace high, double Broadway. And so we're going to kind of construct our betting frequency around that. So let's have a look at how this strategy performs. And I think a good example is going to be this ace 8 deuce board. So I'm going to pull this up. And this is what like an optimal strategy would look like. And what we're going to do is we're going to build the strategy in game. So we're going to build the strategy that we're going to play in game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click tree. I'm going to select strategy and lock node. Yep. And we're going to go about building this strategy that I've shown you guys. So, alrighty. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce all our betting to 0. And we're going to construct this betting strategy that we had in game. And we're going to see how it performs. So, first thing to do is actually to note how much EV we have in the first place, because that's important to note when we're building a strategy like this. And what we're going to see, I'm going to just take a quick snip, and we're going to see that the EV is about 30.54. Now, I'm going to go tree, set strategy and lock node, and we're going to do a little bit of node locking here, and we're going to actually see how this strategy in game performs. Oh, we're going to go check in 100%. I'm going to select the range, select none, and we're going to refer back to this strategy that I've got over here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select our clear value. And I'm going to select my flushes, my sets, and I think 2 pairs in this case are pretty clear value. We're going to select all these, and we're going to have 30% above board. Now, it was important that this board bet about 35% of the time, so we're going to bet these for the small sizing about 65% of the time. And it's important, remember, we're going to be using this small sizing. I've got this for like 1/3, but 1/4 is going to be totally fine as well. I'm going to click lock. We're then going to select a bit more of our value. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select my top pairs. I'm just going to select my best ones. So basically ace 10 plus. And I think this is like, decent value as well. I'm going to bet this roughly 65% of the time. And that's going to be our clear value. That's how much our clear value is betting. Remember, we do need some traps, particularly when we have mixed strategies and on these monotone flops. Okay. The next thing is going to be our showdown. So we're going to be talking about our underpairs, and our trash with showdown. So what I want all my underpairs here. And we're going to bet these 20% below board. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how this strategy performs versus like Pio. And what we're going to do, I'm going to select one of these boards. I think ace 8 deuce is a pretty good example. And we're going to see how much EV we lose by playing this strategy this really simple c-betting strategy that I've outlined for you guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to go bring this up. Alrighty, so we've got ace 8 deuce here, and this is what the optimal strategy looks like, and we see we're betting about 35% of the time, and this is kind of important to note. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick snip, and just as reference for later, but we're just going to be comparing the EV of how my strategy performs versus the optimal solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to go to tree, we're going to have to go to select strategy and lock node, and we're going to do a little bit of node locking, and we're going to input the strategy that we're going to be playing in game. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is we're going to set everything to check, and we're going to select the value part of the range. If we remember, the clear value is going to bet 30% above board. And clear value is kind of a tough definition on a monotone flop, but I think we can accurately say that flushes, sets, and 2 pairs are going to be our clear value. I'm going to select these, and I'm going to use the small sizing. Now, this is going to be a 25% sizing, but again, there's not a huge difference between 25 and 33. We actually just get to bet a little bit more with the 25. And we're going to bet 30% above the board. And in this case, the board betting frequency is 35%. So 30% above board is 65%. Okay, we're going to lock that. We're then going to select a bit of extra value, and I'm just going to select the best top pairs. So I'm going to reckon ace 10 plus. Okay. And we're going to bet this 65% of the time as well. Alrighty, so we do that. We're then going to pick our showdown. And if we remember, our showdown is going to bet our under pairs, and our trash with showdown is going to bet 20% below board. So what we're going to do is going to put under pairs. Going to get rid of these ones because these are board pairs. And the board frequency is 30%. So 20% below board is 10%. Alrighty, lock. We then need to select our trash with showdown. Select none, all. And we want our king high, nothing, no draw. Okay. And these are going to bet 20% below board, so 10% of the time. Lock. Alrighty. And then everything else is going to bet at board frequency. But it's important when we're doing this, we go through each case because, you know, Pi is going to do a little bit of auto correcting for us. So I'm just going to select each of the parts of the range. And so we've got our top pair weak kickers, and we're going to bet these 20% below, at board frequency. So 35% of the time. All right, lock. We're then going to select our second pairs and our third pairs. We're going to get rid of the board pairs because we all decided to not bet those as much. And these are going to bet board frequency as well, so 35% of the time. Select none. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pick our draws. So we're going to have our combo draws. We're going to have combo draws and flush draws together. Okay. And we're going to bet these at board frequency, so 35% of the time. Lock. We're then going to select our open-enders, so king high, nothing, 4-out straight draw. We've only got a couple of those and no draws. We'll get rid of king high, actually. And this is going to be all our trash. And our trash still needs to bet, so we're going to bet that 35% of the time as well. And this is what our strategy is going to look like. Now, if we compare it to the original strat, we're going to see it looks pretty similar. So what we're then going to do is we're going to go lock all, save and close. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run it again and see how it performs. So all I'm going to do is go back here, click go, and we're going to give this, you know, it's going to take a couple minutes to run, but I'm sure I'll snap back to you guys in 2 secs. All right. Alrighty, guys. Well, this is finally done running, and we're going to have a look at now. And so what we're going to see is this is our strategy that we've built with the node lock, and we're going to see our EV is 30.23. Now, if we compare that to our original snip of 30.54, we're going to see that we're losing about 0.3 of a chip, which in this spot is roughly like 50.5% of the pot. And again, this is totally acceptable EV loss when we're creating like a really simplified strategy that we can play in game. So I would say that worked out pretty well. And I would say that for you guys that are trying to mix, something like this is going to work. And now the biggest thing when we are playing a strategy like this is understanding how much we're meant to be betting. And understanding that mono boards, particularly these double Broadway, Ace-X mono boards, aren't particularly great for the button player. And so we're going to be only betting 30 to 50% of the time. And then implementing something like this in game is going to give you a really, really accurate kind of strategy that's going to get us close to equilibrium whilst not being too complicated and something you can replicate in game. So to summarize here, monotone boards, single raise pots, when we're out of position, we can just range check, not really worry about it. And on the better ones, like those lower monotone flops, we go for an aggressive check raise strategy. And then when we're in position, when we are the button, what we get to do is we get to play a range bet on the best boards. So, you know, lower boards, only a single Broadway. But when there's double Broadway Ace-X, we are going to need a mix. On the absolute worst ones, we can range check like Ace-King X, Ace-Queen X. But on those like, you know, middling boards like Queen Jack 2 or something, or Queen Jack 10 or something, what we're going to have to do is we are going to have to play a mix strategy, and I've shown you guys how to mix, and we're going to play something like this. Now, I hope this guys helped you guys. If you guys want to see more stuff on how to play monotone boards, we can have a look at that in future. Maybe have a look at how to play on the turn as well, because that's also pretty interesting. Maybe some 3-bet pots as well. Let me know in the comments below what you guys would like to see. Until next time, cheers. Bye.